Hi, my name is Gordon Draper, and I'm the host of the Cyber Consulting Room podcast. Today, I'm joined by Simona Dimovski, a seasoned executive with over 2 decades of experience shaping technology and security strategies. Simona has a proven track record of leading digital transformations and safeguarding sensitive data in highly regulated environments. Her career spans top-tier brands in finance, aviation, energy, and critical infrastructure, where she has consistently delivered exceptional results. Simona has a proven ability to navigate complex business environments and inspire teams to achieve exceptional outcomes. She has led successful digital transformations, built high-performance teams, and fostered a culture of innovation and continuous improvement. Hi, thank you for joining us today, Simona.
Hi, Gordon. Thank you for having me.
So my first question is usually, how did you get into cybersecurity/information security? And what advice do you have for people looking to join the cyber industry?
Yeah, look, I've been in tech and cyber for the last 25 years. I've worked across various industries, like you mentioned, including government and highly regulated environments. My journey into cybersecurity was actually natural progression for where I had come in terms of technology and risk management. And as I took on more leadership roles, I began to see how integral cybersecurity was to business continuity and success. So it became really clear that understanding how to protect sensitive data and critical infrastructure would be the foundation for innovation and business growth. And I've been immersed in the field ever since. In terms of advice that I would have for others, cybersecurity is an ever evolving field. My biggest advice would be to stay curious, to never stop learning. One thing to remember as well, contrary to popular belief, cybersecurity is really not just about the technical skills. Those can be foundational, but it's really about understanding how cyber fits into the broader business strategy. You have to remember the human element behind the technology. So I would say to anyone wanting to get into cyber, really look at cyber very broadly. Think about cyber not just as that technology aspect, but think about the risk that you're trying to manage. Think about sort of the business strategy and how security fits into that. Think about the sort of data the organization holds, and how do you actually go about protecting that. Get really immersed into the real world challenges of what is happening in the cyber space, how it's affecting different industries. For example, how is it affecting banking? How is it affecting sort of with all the scams that we're hearing about? How is that actually affecting humans as well? So key message and takeaway is think of cyber very broadly, not just as a technical field. And then the other aspect to this is don't forget to really network with people that you find are in this field, connect with mentors, join organizations, and stay active in that cyber community.
Yeah,
Those would be my biggest tips.
I was just at a big conference in Canberra, Australia, the B-Sides Canberra Festival, Cybersecurity Hackers Festival, basically. It's a conference that had a couple of different tracks of talks and it went from Thursday through to Saturday. And
Yes.
the networking capability and being able to chat to different people from different areas within cybersecurity, it was really a key moment, especially for there was a careers village which was also involved, which allowed for people to network, to meet prospective employers, and also to go looking for different ways of improving their CVs or even interview skills.
Yeah.
So the networking capabilities that you describe is some very good advice to pass on to people.
Yes, definitely. And just on that as well, I mean, I know you and I were talking about sort of like different conferences, meetups. It doesn't even have to be, a full-blown conference if people can't get the, for whatever the tickets, can be even one-on-one. It can be about, just leaning into someone on LinkedIn and asking them, can they support you? Or you're interested in this and that about cyber, what advice do they have to offer, especially if they're in that field. So, and I think it's about thinking of networking in a different way as well. In the past, like I know myself, I used to think about networking as something more transactional, whether there was a clear aim that, of what each party was going to get out of this. But for me, in the last probably 5 to 10 years, networking isn't really at all about that. For me, it's all about being able to connect with like minded people where each one of you can help each other sort of grow and flourish in some sort of a way. And that may be by sharing information, it could be just by giving advice, it could just be by connecting someone to someone else as well. So I think that that's really critical.
Yeah, I love the features within LinkedIn for being able to connect with people and message people. And a lot of people in the industry are open to having someone come and connect to them. And then while there may be an ask, but usually there's a give before you ask for something. And
Yeah.
so the people joining to network may end up asking for a coffee and a catch up to get started, and
Yeah.
then maybe some advice. I've had a number of people students ask me for advice on how to get into cybersecurity and what certifications do they need to obtain and things like that. As a executive in cybersecurity, do you get people coming in and connecting with you of various experience levels?
Yes, yeah. Look, people have reached out to me on so many different things. I do provide mentorship to individuals, mentorship and coaching in this space. I do a lot of talks at women in tech and as well as other conferences on particular subjects. It could be not just about sort of the coaching and mentorship, it could be about one recently that I did was around incident management. How do you prepare for a cyber incident? How do you prepare your organization? And off the back of that conference and that talk, a number of people have reached out to me either to help support their organization with a cyber simulation or specifically, to give them advice, to give them feedback even on some of the work that they're doing, or even just to point them in the right direction. So I have a lot of people reaching out to me off the back of whether it's a conference, whether it's a connection. People are introducing each other and myself to other people all the time. And to be quite honest, in my experience, every time that I have asked someone for help, because I do the same thing, I also ask other people for help with things that I'm doing. Everybody that I've ever reached out to has really been open to be able to, has really wanted to help me in some way. So that's why I also say to people, if you ever need the support, find someone. If you know them already, that's great. If you don't, on LinkedIn, everybody's been really, really open to be able to support each other. So yeah, I have people reaching out to me all the time. I mean, within capacity, obviously, with what's possible and what people's time allows, everyone has been really open, as well as myself, to help others. So that's, yeah, definitely
That's
something I'm really open to.
definitely some good advice and a good experience that you're providing and sharing. I noticed that you're also a member of the Australian Information Security Association Executive Committee. What would you say are some of the current trends and challenges facing the cybersecurity industry in Australia based on your experience with this committee?
Yeah, look, I think really good questions. One of the key trends that we're seeing in Australia at the moment is this increasing focus on regulatory compliance, especially as cyber incidents grow in both frequency and sophistication. I had a lot of organizations actually reaching out to me about how do they make decisions, how do they prepare for a cyber incident, and I know we were just mentioned that previously, but they're really grappling with the rise of ransomware, the supply chain vulnerabilities, the need for stronger incident response plans. I think this is very, very much front of mind just for a lot of businesses because they're reaching out to me now saying, hey, can you help us in this space? So I think those are really kind of high on the agenda for a lot of businesses. And then the other thing is, we still have this talent gap in cybersecurity. It's still a challenge. We're also seeing a shift, though, from organizations to more proactive management of cyber defense strategies. So they're no longer just kind of waiting to see if they're going to be a target. I think a lot of organizations are adopting that mentality where, they recognize that cyber incident is not a matter of if it's going to happen, it's about, when it's going to happen. And then to add another element of that, all the organizations I'm talking to are also thinking about, well, if a cyber incident is going to happen, then we want to be best prepared to be able to react very quickly, to be able to contain the incident very quickly. We want to protect our brand. We want to be able to really kind of come back from something fairly quickly. We don't want to be on the front page for doing it, in a wrong way, because we want to make sure that now, while we've got the time, we're able to actually set ourselves up for success. So I think that all of these aspects are really front of mind, and I think through ASA, we're all about educating the sector, educating other CISOs, educating other businesses about sort of cybersecurity in all of its facets. So I think that that's also really front of mind.
I think that's some great roles and comments with regards to the current trends and challenges. Definitely the regulatory component is, I was involved with the industry panel for the Australian federal government for the consultation period associated with some new cybersecurity laws that they're bringing in, both in the Security of Critical Infrastructure, SOCI Act, and also the potential for reporting of ransomware, amongst other components. So they're talking about a signage component for Internet of Things devices. And it's definitely these sorts of what I found interesting from those sorts of that experience was the industry would heavily involve law firms to even ask questions surrounding the consultation process. And that while in the case of an incident and the responding to an incident, in some cases, companies are bringing on law firms as not just as a legal component, but also to then engage the incident response component so that they can try to have it covered under legal privilege. There was a situation with Optus in Australia recently that their response to the incident and the report from the incident response report, there was a class action from a law firm from Optus is a mobile phone telecommunications company in Australia. And so there was a class action from customers associated with having their data stolen as a response, as an impact of this incident. And during that class action, there was they've gone to the court and they've asked for a copy of the incident response report. And Optus has said, no, that's under legal privilege. So we don't have to make that incident response report available to you during the discovery process. And the court turned around and said, well, no, that's not covered by legal privilege, I'm afraid. So there's certainly a trend towards engaging legal, but in a different way and trying to extend it to cover legal privilege, I think.
Yeah, look, one of the things that I'm doing at the moment is teaching businesses, especially small to medium businesses as well as bigger businesses, but in the small to medium area, a lot of these businesses don't either have the resources, they may not sometimes have the level of maturity required to decipher the upcoming changes, from a compliance perspective and legal perspective about what it means for them and what they have to comply with when it comes to cyber and a cyber incident. So I'm spending a bit of time with small to medium businesses at the moment, walking them through what I've devised as the integrated incident management framework, which is not just about, how, like, all the things that the organization needs to do internally, but it's about also who they need to engage with. It's about, who do they have in their corner when the incident strikes, in a sense, like who will they be able to call quickly to help them figure out which every single reporting body that they need to speak to. The work that I'm doing at the moment with these organizations is about preparing for that and making sure that they know who they're going to have on their panel. Are they going to need a lawyer That's one of the top questions, because that legal privilege is real, and especially in cases where, depending on the threat and where the threat has come in from, if it's sort of like an insider threat, but even broader than that, if it's an external threat actor or even a nation state, we've seen that some things are possible in terms of sort of legal proceedings if you have that legal privilege behind you. So exactly what you were saying, Gordon, as well. I think it's really important to think of this not just about all the things that you're going to need to do to protect the organization, to isolate the incident, to recover, to really contain sort of the impact, but also what will it mean if you do have to go to trial? What will it mean if it's a state actor, and who else needs to get involved? Of course, there's regulatory requirements to report, depending on whether you're a regulated business. I mean, we've got sort of government bodies that need to be made aware. We've got the privacy commissioner as well that needs to be made aware of certain things depending on the incident. But navigating all of this stuff should not be done in the moment when you're having, in the midst of a crisis. You really need to have everything in place beforehand to be able to navigate this as smoothly as possible when the incident occurs.
And definitely some practice associated with that, such as you only perform under pressure in the moment based on how well you have practiced your training.
Exactly.
And so tabletop
right.
exercises regularly is definitely a great recommendation.
100%. You can have all the way well laid out plans, but unless you've practiced those plans, you've looked at them, you have got people, building that muscle memory. You really can't rely on something that's written on a piece of paper put on a shelf. And so the thing about the plans is that they actually have to be practiced, like a fire drill. How if you go to any organization over a period of time, they're going to have a fire drill where they actually make you walk down the staircase and meet with who you need to meet, and make sure that you congregate with everybody that needs to be part of this exercise. So it's about really building those muscle memory into us, so we know how we need to respond, what we need to pick up, what's the plan that we need to execute, who do we need to call, who do we escalate to. All of that stuff goes without saying that it has to be a matter of practice, not just a plan that's kind of written out and forgotten about somewhere in a shelf.
Yeah, put it in a drawer somewhere. And,
yes.
Oh wait, I think I've got something. So
Yes.
I printed out folder somewhere.
Oh gosh, yes. And it's like a massive manual that you can never kind of go through. Yeah, that wouldn't be a good experience at all.
So you're also an ambassador with the New South Wales as the New South Wales Cyber Ambassador. How do you leverage your role there to promote cybersecurity awareness and best practices within the state?
Yeah. Look, I think like we talked about earlier, a lot of this is about cyber awareness. So it's really about bringing the messages of cybersecurity to a more broader audience, whether it's from local councils to small to medium enterprises. And a lot of the work that I do with the cyber ambassadorship is really with even schools. So we go and speak to students, talk to them about cyber, get them really kind of more aware about what their responsibilities are, what to look out for, what are the red flags, how do they protect themselves. This is not just in terms of the students, but it's also with the staff as well, and really kind of cover off everything that we would normally with any business or organization. We run through these things as early as we can so that we can change the culture of Australians going forward. So the cyber ambassadorship is really quite a lot of it is about awareness from business to individuals across Australia.
Oh yeah, so it definitely is that. Would you say the cybersecurity awareness programs for the state are the prime motive, the prime directive of the New South Wales Cybersecurity Ambassador, or there are other areas that they do as well that you're working on as well?
Yeah, there are. So the ambassadorship, like the New South Wales Cyber Ambassadorship, was brought out to help the government with the cybersecurity strategy that's in place or was in place from 2020 to 2023 and beyond. So even with the new strategy, with particular pillars in that strategy, one of them was around skills shortages, and really kind of how do we boost the skills shortage? How do we get more trained people coming through in terms of cybersecurity through the ranks, and also obviously getting into the industry? So there are particular specific outcomes that are associated with the New South Wales cyber ambassadorships that relate back into the strategy 2023, or the new strategy as well now. Awareness is one of them. Training is another aspect. A lot of what ASA does is, which is the Australian Information Security Association, is to help deliver some of the outcomes of the New South Wales cyber strategy.
Oh, that's good. I
Yeah.
didn't realize that ASA had been working so closely with the government and that program. So that's really interesting. As a leader within the in the cybersecurity industry, and given you've had experience in the financial sector, how do you balance the need for data security with the demands of financial innovation and customer experience?
Yeah. Look, this has always been a bit of a sort of tension point, I would call it, or maybe it's just a good tension point. There's always a balance between innovation and security, it seems like. Just like, I don't know if you've heard that there's always this balance between project work and BAU work. And it's about how do we prioritize embedding security into every stage of product development, without compromising the customer experience. For me, that's the real crux of this. We can make the most secure systems available to humankind, but if they're not going to be usable, if they're so restrictive that they're, in order to prioritize security, that's not going to work either. So I think it's a real balancing point. It's about how do we then shift it left. Let's not, and shifting left is about how do we kind of start with a security design and not have to compromise on customer experience, but how do we include security intrinsically into everything that we're doing, so that it's not sort of like a byproduct at the end or something that we have to think of last minute, because if that happens, then we've just wasted all of this development work early on if we're not going to get a secure solution at the end. So it's about how do we bring it sort of earlier into the life cycle of the product development life cycle. How do we get everybody to start thinking, yes, we've got to deliver some great app as an example, but we also have to deliver it in a very secure way so that we don't, compromise the organization, of course, data, customer data, and we don't compromise all this time and effort that we've spent on this work if we're going to get an unsecure outcome at the end. So I think it's quite a big balance. I'm not sure how well, I know that, a lot of product teams are under immense pressure to deliver outcomes, and to, roll changes out and make sure that, sort of from a usability perspective, that these sort of product updates are fast and done at speed. And I think for me, the what's been front of mind is, how do we actually get security not to be as an add-on, but that we're, it's part of the process. So
I
yeah.
particularly like the Critical Infrastructure Security Agency out of America, the CSA. They've been pushing for secure by design as a feature of the design process for software. I think one of the comments that came out recently from Jen Easterly, director of CSA, is that the villains are actually the people that write bad software. It's not necessarily the hackers or
Mm.
the
Yes.
researchers that are finding the vulnerabilities or finding
Yeah.
the gaps in the software. It's writing them poorly to begin with. I mean,
Yes.
you even have a situation where, I mean, engineers in other industries, such as an aeronautical engineer, has to go through extreme design standards and regulation requirements for making sure that to build something, even a bridge, for that there's expectations that a bridge will function and not fall over under high wind. And so there's all these standards and requirements associated with these hard engineering. But in software, it hasn't been that case. It's been a bit of a wild west. And
Yeah.
so, for example, I saw someone walking along in the city of Sydney with on their way to work with a "Move fast and break things" T-shirt, and
Yeah.
that mentality is embedded in software engineers and businesses in startups developing software. It's not move fast, break things, and keep things secure. It's a balance, definitely, but there's
Yeah.
also this culture
Yes.
associated with just ignore security and let's make some money kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. Look, it has definitely in the past, in some cases, really felt like that. It was such a uphill battle to try and educate, sort of other teams on what secure practices mean. And I think for me, this is really a question of culture and management sort of directive. I think that you can't really be successful if it's all on the security team to sort of push security forward, to advocate for security, to really kind of stop from changes from being released because they're unsecure. That will never be sustainable model going. It may work for a little bit of time, but I think if the organization is not prioritizing security as a key enabler, not a barrier, and that might mean that
Mm.
people will have to slow down in some cases in order to speed up, then I think that's going to be a recipe for disaster. It really can't be done without the organization coming together and sort of putting their money where their mouth is and really backing security. If and I've seen those t-shirts too, and if
Mm-hmm.
people are still considering that, I think business agility is also a really important thing, but it can't be at the price of security. And I think that's what organizations really need to realize.
Oh, definitely. I've seen it in bigger organizations that don't move as fast, but there's some studies that have been done that if you identify vulnerabilities earlier in the design process, it's actually cheaper to fix them then and
Yes.
there than it
Yeah.
is to try to do it at the very end and hold things up. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, we've gone to production, but oh, we didn't bother putting multi-factor authentication in, which is pretty
Yeah.
common actually.
Yes.
So it's changing slowly, but it's pretty common that applications don't have multi-factor authentication.
Yeah.
But that's just one control, and so it's certainly an interesting environment associated with that.
Yeah. I agree.
So moving to another set of experience that you've had with the you were the CIO of the Sutherland Shire Council in Sydney. How have you applied your information technology background to develop data-driven solutions, security solutions at Sutherland Shire Council, for example? How would you, so data-driven as in would you have
Mm.
metrics in various places to help inform you and drive your strategy?
Yeah. Look, I think one of the things that I've always kind of been a big advocate of is, like when we talked about sort of business agility, I'm a trained Scrum Master. I've done design thinking courses. I have obviously been in tech and cyber. I'm trained in security as well. And so for me, all of this, it's not at the expense of the other disciplines. So you can't really just do technology for technology's sake or security for security's sake. And, it has to all be part of an ecosystem. So I think what I would say, you really have to think about sort of technology, security, agility, how that all plays into the outcomes or the strategy that the organization's trying to deliver. For who are they delivering that? And with Southern Shire Council being a council, you know, delivering services and outcomes to the community, it was really, really important to think of, what we were delivering, who we were delivering it to, how do we do it in a secure way, not to compromise anything for our communities and for the council as well. So I think in terms of how I've used sort of security and that mindset, it's about really working out, what needs to be secure, what sort of data are we holding, who it doesn't need to be secure for, but at what price do we need to make security the priority over something else? And so I think it's really just about kind of assessing those risks, assessing that ecosystem all the time. It's not like a straightforward answer in a way. At different points, it's different things that matter more and that need to be prioritized more. And when we're thinking about security, as an example, like we really had to fit into everything else that we were doing as part of the tech and cyber strategy at council. And I think the strategy that I put together at the time definitely incorporated security. I think it's up on the website still, on the Sutherland Shire website, because I think it's up until 2024. So it's definitely something for people to have a look at, as well, if in the spirit of what we were talking about earlier, like around that sort of teaching and advisory and training. You really have to think about not just the parts that make up council or technology or the strategy. You have to really think of it as a whole ecosystem.
That's some really good points. So you have to measure the identify which data
Yes.
bases you have, data storage that you have in
Yeah.
different databases, and what are your data you're working with,
Yeah.
and then measuring assessing the risk associated with the likelihood and impact of what could go wrong in various
Exactly.
parts to it. And risk being the language of business should also be to an extent understood by government organisations such as the Shire Council. And
Yeah.
so and all of that, it comes into to fundamentally to businesses, which is what is their core business, what really matters to the business, and making sure that security is not there to impose. It's more to enable functions to achieve what they, as you described earlier,
Yeah.
security as an enabler as opposed to a blocker. I think
Yeah.
that's a really, really good line.
Yeah. And I think, we're using, my time at Sutherland Shire as an example, but really it's the same for any business that you're in. You've really got to be able to understand what data do you have? What are you holding? What's so important about that data? Who would care you know, if it was breached in any way? What is the most critical data around? So where's your crown jewels? What systems are affected? And what measures do you have to put into those that are different potentially because of the threat or because of the exposure and the severity of that, opposed to other systems? You may not, different controls may be required in different circumstances for different systems and for different outcomes. So I think it's really important, like that. It's not a one, you know kind of like a one brush across everything. You really have to be a little bit more pragmatic. You have to get into a little bit more of the detail to understand sort of what measures you have to put in place in order to offer the right level of protection as well. I think these are all critical elements. I mean, that's yeah, it's quite, there's a whole industry around this, right? Yeah, it's quite involved. But I think the takeaway for this particular one would be that you have to really think of all the different variables around rather than just looking at security in isolation.
And one of the components, while security, as we were describing, is definitely a feature affecting organisations these days, and there are varying sizes of businesses that may end up with a security team or at least a security person. How did you integrate cybersecurity into broader organisational culture and
Yeah.
strategy? So you've talked about the strategy at the council and things like that, but how did you go about bringing security culture into organisations that you've worked with?
Yeah, that's a really good one because as long as you've got security in the name of the role you're in, or you've got a security team that's got that security in the name of the team, a lot of pretty much the whole organization just thinks that we've got a security team and they're going to handle all the security for us. So I always found that that was a very big education that needed to happen across all the departments, across the organization, that security is actually everyone's responsibility. It's not really something that you can kind of just assign one person to take care of the security of the whole organization if everybody else is not versed with what it means to be secure and what their role is as well. And so I think one of the biggest things that we did, in previous organizations is really kind of to do that awareness. And it's an ongoing awareness. And it starts from, every single person at the operational level, and then it goes on to sort of the management level, and, even all the way to the board. Everyone really needs to understand what they're responsible for, but at the same time we also need to be able to measure how effective that culture is. And are we, if we say we're going to be kind of an organization that does not tolerate having an insecure environment, then how effective are we in that? So I think I would go back to say that it's been probably one of the core pillars of being in these sort of senior roles, to do that education for the whole organization together with other leadership sort of counterparts. It's about really making sure that every single person and every single team understands what their threats are for that particular team. So if we're thinking of the finance team, what are some of the likely things that they need to watch out for? What are the things that they need to be doing? What are the things, what are the likely threats that may be coming your way, and how do you respond to those? So I'd say, yeah, really, I think thinking of that culture piece is a whole organization effort, rather than just having someone in the security team assigned to keep the organization secure. Because once again, like we said earlier, that's really not going to be effective. That's not an effective strategy, long-term strategy that's sustainable, because it will fail.
Yeah, definitely. I like the idea that you've just pointed out that a lot of businesses, people working in different businesses, will see that there is a cybersecurity person or a cybersecurity team, and they will think that, oh, we've got security covered. We've got a person for that. It's like saying, hey, I've got a firewall, or we've got antivirus. Yeah, it's fine. We don't need to do anything more. Tick. But what sorts of initiatives did you put in place to bring that to the people to these organizations?
Yeah, look, so the human factor is still the weakest link when it comes to cybersecurity. If you look at different statistics, it might be different, but in some cases, it's between 70 to 90% or 95% of all the sort of the incidents that occur. At some level, they started with a human, whether it's credentials, whether it's a mistake, whether it's a phishing has gone kind of wrong, or it was successful for the hacker. So a huge proportion of the incidents are attributed back to humans. So the human factor really does need a lot of attention, and in many cases, it's actually easier in a way to deal with the technical aspects, because yes, you can just roll out that tool and put that firewall in and put those firewall rules in place, and yes, review them over time. But that in itself is sort of the easy part. The human factor is something that's an ongoing campaign. It is an ongoing education that needs to happen, and it can't just be that we, have these automated learning modules and we roll them out to people and then we test them and then that's it. That in itself, I think, is not as effective. So it has to involve different elements. Like some of the campaigns that I've run previously have had lunch and learn sessions. We've had, cyber escape rooms, which is again a different form of learning. There's been awareness around having key speakers come Obviously, we've got, again, the testing aspect of like, here is some education that we're putting forward. This is the sort of things that we're trying to test or at least bring awareness to, and then let's test whether we were effective in that or not. So really kind of measuring the aspects of the campaign that are working and how well they're working has also been critical to uplifting sort of that human firewall and the maturity of staff. Some really effective things that I've seen as well, and I've been part of, where we've had these gamified sort of experiences when it comes to cyber learning. And I remember at one workplace I didn't organise this, so I can't take the credit,
Hmm.
but we had a magician come in and almost kind of crack someone's phone right in front of them. We had, so that they could at least understand how easy it was or what they should watch out for. In another workplace, which was organized by me, we had someone come in and demonstrate how easy it was to mimic and hijack sort of public Wi-Fi and public Wi-Fi, even credentials and other information off public Wi-Fi. So that was really successful. I think experiential learning, where people can come in, be immersed, experience something for themselves, has been really, really effective as well. But I think it's overall, it's a big combination of things. You can't really just rely on one thing when it comes to sort of that human element, that people are going to take that awareness and apply it from there on in. It has to be continuous as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So at DEF CON in Las Vegas, it's a big hacking festival that gets between 25 and 30,000 people. So it's a lot of people. And there's people that connect to the conference Wi-Fi, and there's a risk of being attacked if you do. But there's one department, one village they call it. It's a packet hacking village. They have what's called the Wall of Sheep, and that is a projector shooting a real-time feed of whatever passwords they can find through the Wi-Fi that phones and
That's,
and
yeah,
laptops are communicating. So they've joined to it's on the regular Wi-Fi, but it's just listing, and it's like, oh, I just stolen this person's username and password just because they were on the Wi-Fi.
yeah,
It's amazing what that's a really good tool, I think, for showing people. I
yeah,
did another one where it's not as dramatic, but it was a sample of hacking for showing people what it looks like to actually hack a website and steal data from the website. And I mean, that's text going down effectively down a wire through packets. So
yeah,
it's not as pretty as something not as effective as an awareness campaign as showing, look, yes, you actually gave away your password via the public Wi-Fi that we were mimicking. But I
yeah,
think these sorts of awareness initiatives are really, really beneficial. And as you said, it's reminding people that it needs to be brought out to people's attention and regularly and constantly,
yes,
because people are going to have weak moments and forget. And that's what
exactly.
the social engineering campaigns of bad actors rely
Yeah,
on.
exactly right. Yeah.
So, moving to elements related to dealing with the boards of businesses, how did you how do you leverage your role as the New South Wales Cyber Ambassador to advocate for cybersecurity priorities at the state and national level? So, in that case, talking about the government organisation and governments enabling
Yeah.
behaving at a board level governance perspective. But likewise, how would rather than also, instead of particularly focusing on the cyber ambassador, how do you deal with boards that you've worked with as a
Yeah.
senior executive?
Look, I think in terms of sort of the boards and the experience that I've had, again, even last year, we did a massive campaign around, preparing the organisation for an incident and what our response was going to be. So I think that that was a critical element to bring also to the board and also have them be part of the experience. What would be some of the decisions they might need to make, as an example? How do we get them prepared for what this might look like as well? So that's been quite a big involvement from my end around sort of getting boards educated, getting them prepared. Kind of keeping them abreast with what's happening as well through the regular reporting cycles as well. With in terms of sort of cyber data, what are the risks that are there? What are we actually doing about them? So I think that regular reporting has also been a critical element. I think more from the cyber ambassadorship, it's really about kind of staying very close to what is happening at a state level, what's happening at a national level, what's happening at a local government level as well. When we're talking about cybersecurity and what sort of contributing into those discussions on policy development, promoting public and private partnerships that foster innovation but also are cybersecurity conscious as well. So I think from my end, that sort of board involvement is really important because it just, like we talked about earlier on, where we said, okay, cybersecurity is, or sort of like that, the responsibility around cyber. It's not just for that security team. I touched on it then as well, but like in terms of your cyber program altogether and your cyber culture in the organization, you really do need to take it all the way to the board. If you
Mm.
don't, again, I don't want to kind of constantly say, well, it's not going to be successful, but if you don't have that level of awareness, buy-in, interaction, and communication and transparency all the way to the board level, I think that there is a critical element that will be missed for that organization, especially since board members also have a personal liability when it comes to cyber. I think what I'm seeing is that a lot of boards are a lot more involved. They want to be involved. They want to know what's happening. So the appetite and the willingness is there from the board level, and I think in my experience, it's actually been a really good time to connect with boards on some of these real things that matter when it comes to cybersecurity. And yeah, I think from
Mm.
my perspective, it's just a really welcome exchange that does need to happen.
Oh, it's the sort of discussions that you get involved with with boards to board members.
Yeah,
A lot of them they know how to run businesses, but
yes,
the idea that someone's coming for their data and their money, they don't know how to.
yeah,
And they're being told that they need to think about this area
yes,
both through direct messaging through things like the Australian Institute of Company Directors, and also through their training in business governance. And so they're being told that they need to. It's top of the line. They need to start thinking about and being aware of.
yeah,
But then there's other areas within the organisation that may be part of the old, and so executives and boards are pushing down, getting the buy-in from the culture and pushing down on people. But then there's other areas within the lower tiers which come from the move fast and break things component, and not necessarily as focused on security as I just want to do something cool, let me be, as
yeah,
opposed to security, which is like, well, let's put on. I like the analogy of the software that people are developing as sort of like a little robot that you're sending out to war. So let's put some armor on it. Let's defend it so that it
yeah.
can survive the attacks that are going to come towards it. And so it's definitely so. What would you say that there's challenges for effective communications of bringing the security culture, and as you were saying, from getting a buy-in from the top down, you certainly can't change culture if you don't get the top board and executives buy-in. That's for sure. So
Yeah.
how did you work
Yeah.
with that sort of environment?
Yeah, look, I think one of the things that I've been very mindful to do, even not just about the board conversation, but just in general, is when we're looking at cyber, or if I'm looking at sort of technical issues, is really to translate them into business risks. So, what does it really mean if we have X, Y, and Z vulnerability, as an example? Because no one's really going to understand that vulnerability unless they're part of the technical sort of cyber team and understand what that means. So for me, dealing with boards and even executives and other business units has always been to try and make it relevant for them and what it means for them. So what's the insight? What's the so what of what I'm trying to communicate with them? So that translation from those technical risks as an example into sort of business risks or strategic risks, that's the sort of stuff that I'm working to bring to those boards. So that they actually understand, because a lot of the time for the board, it's they want the organization to do the right thing. They want to feel that we're actually someone's looking and taking care of cyber, as an example, right? But in my experience, for a long time, it was actually really hard to communicate that, because maybe as technology professionals and cyber professionals, we got caught up in the detail. So for me, I think a critical element of this interaction with the boards is to actually speak their language. What does it actually mean if we've got this particular technical risk? So I think that that's quite key. That's been a game changer. And that's how we can also impart on what their responsibilities are. And they know their responsibilities. Like from my experience, the boards have been really, really, really supportive. Like I've not had an interaction where it wasn't supportive, even when it was a compliance matter, as an example, whether it was sort of cyber risks that were being communicated, whether it was reprioritizing a cyber program, or even if I was going to the board to actually let them know of some critical gaps, what that meant and what we were going to do about it. It's always been quite positive. I think overall boards are really open to helping the organization work through this and what the best outcome for the organization. And they just need to know, what does it look like? What do we need to do? What is that so what and now what sort of question. So I think that that's been quite critical.
Oh, definitely. I can see that you've had to express cybersecurity in many different forms of discussion with the board, and you're obviously very good at it. So it's great to pick your mind and get some advice with this particular area. And moving into onto complex environments, how did you balance the competing priorities for security, efficiency, and service delivery in your role as CIO at Sutherland Shire Council? Or
Yeah.
even it doesn't have to be just on the council, but a security, efficiency, and service delivery in the councils. Obviously, there's definitely a service delivery as well, but you've also been in financial services as one
Yes.
organisation. So
Yeah.
I'm sure you can draw upon lots of areas with your experience.
Yeah, definitely. Like we touched on this already, but I think the thing to keep in mind always is that balancing security, efficiency, service delivery, it requires that holistic approach that we talked about before. And it's almost like you can't do one without the other. Or if you do one to the maximum in one area, then you might compromise something else in another. So whether it's, if you're going to go for all the security in the world, you've still got to get a product out. So you have to still be pragmatic. If you're going to go for all the efficiency, well, you can't be at the expense of security. And if you're going to try and deliver something, it's going to have both elements. Like it has to be secure, or you should aim for it to be secure, and you also want to aim to get it out there so people can start using it. So I think the key here is that it has to be a holistic approach. But all of those areas you have to see them as complementary rather than conflicting. Sometimes you have to put the balance up on, or like put that lever up on one and put the lever down on another in a way so that they can kind of complement each other. But at the same time, you've got to see them all as part of the different parts of the whole. And you can't have a whole organization without considering all of these, but then you can't take parts of this out either, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So, so I think here it's when I'm talking about it has to be holistic. All of these areas have to be, you have to see them as complementary to each other, not conflicting to each other. You have to take that risk-based approach where I'm talking about, pushing those levers up or down a little bit. Well, that can't just be arbitrarily doing what you can't just decide, oh, I'm just going to do this or this. Yeah, you have to have some method to behind that. Usually what I
But
find is that a risk-based approach is sort of the best measure to go forward with.
that's some good advice. Definitely, a risk based, allowing risk to influence your decision making, and is some very good advice. What I thankfully these three are not part of triangles such as your time cost quality triangle. So it's not that you're losing one if you get the other two. You can have security and you can have efficiency and you can deliver products and services. So
Exactly.
that's they're independent, but they all contribute definitely.
Yeah.
What challenges and opportunities did you encounter when transitioning from a government organisation to a private sector company?
Okay. Well, I had spent, 25 years of my career. Maybe at the time when I moved to private to local government, it was maybe 20 years. But I'd spent 20 years in tech and cyber across various industries. It was banking and financials, aviation, energy. And then I moved into local government, which was very different to anything that I had been at or, worked at previously. But at the same time, I think the landscape was different. I know that any role that I've been in and any sector that I've been in has been slightly different as well. But the principles behind technology and security are very much similar, regardless of the sort of industry that you're in. Of course, there's the nuances with what the business is doing, what the organization does for a living, and you've got to be able to know that because that's how you can be also very effective. But at the same time, when it comes to technology and security, you can traverse multiple industries, with sort of your foundational understanding and knowledge as well. So, look, I think the challenges in the private sector and the public sector are different. I think, I found there was in local government especially there was a lot of sort of you've got a lot of challenges around resourcing, you have a lot of challenges around sort of funding, you have a lot of complications because local government is running many different business units. What would traditionally be a separate, completely separate business unit like waste is totally different to the way that you run a library, as an example, which is totally different again to the way you might run a planning division. So I think it's a very complex environment because it's servicing so many different businesses, and technology and cyber, managing technology and cyber across all of those. It's really highly complex, and I think I did not really give it enough appreciation maybe before I was in the role as to what that
Mm.
would look like. So I think that that's been quite a massive learning for me as well. Whereas in traditional, in other businesses that I've been part of, for example, if it was energy, while I was at Ausgrid, we knew what we were producing, and it wasn't, that we were doing trying to do everything under the sun. Or even if I've been in an insurance company, again, we're kind of very clear. And I know with local government, we were very clear. It was just that it was such a vast array of different businesses that I was supporting. So I think that that was probably pretty challenging. I think I was there during a very challenging time as well during COVID.
Mm.
And, I started the role in 2019, like probably about 3 months before COVID was, we had to work remotely. And, as soon as I started, I had a plan of what we were going to do and what I was going to do. And then we had to accelerate that plan tenfold, like had to really move mountains to enable the organization to work remotely, to, kind of comply with all the ever-changing government rules that were coming in on a daily basis. So it was quite a big challenge. I think that those years we should probably think about, like, those were the COVID years, and anything else apart from that was probably a lot easier and smoother to navigate in a normal work environment.
I saw a meme that was, what influenced your digital, what was the impetus for the digital
Yeah.
transformation of your organization? Was it the CEO, the board, the CIO, or
Yeah.
COVID-19? And the COVID-19 is usually the answer.
Yes, yeah, and it was exactly that. Like, I think it was just such a different time while I was in local government, and it was the whole time that I was there, like almost from the beginning. But it was to be quite honest. I mean, I think we achieved a huge uplift in both technology and security during that time. That, I think I've mentioned this before, we thought it was going to take, 2 years. It was a 2-year program that I had been kind of mapping out as soon as it started, that we had to, you know, make happen probably in a matter of weeks, maybe about 8 weeks. So,
Wow.
and there was, of course, other work that needed to kind of retrospectively occur, but all the MVP, the minimal viable product, was delivered in like short amount of time.
In a short
Yeah.
succession.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much for your time. You've provided some great discussion points and definitely some key takeaways from your experience. Thank you very much, Simona. I'd like to thank you for your time, and we'll wrap it up there. So
Sounds great.
thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Gordon. Such a good discussion. Hopefully, your listeners will take something away from this. And if you need anything, or if any of the listeners need anything, please don't feel free to reach out.
Oh, nearly forgot that question. So where can the listeners find you online?
Oh yes, I've got, so LinkedIn's probably the best place to find me, and I don't think that there's many other Simona Dimovskis. Maybe there's probably just me. So please reach out to me on LinkedIn. I do have, yeah, if you go to LinkedIn, then you can find my website and other stuff as well. And I can send you something as well. But LinkedIn's probably the first place.
Oh, that's awesome. So I will definitely direct listeners to reach out to you if they're looking for you via LinkedIn. Well, thank you very much for your time, and we'll move into the next Cyber Consulting Room podcast. Thank you.